What's going on, everyone? Patrick here, and in this video I'm going to talk about multi-product break-even and target profit. And in videos before I've talked about break-even and target profit but for single products. But what if a company is producing multiple products? How do we find the break-even, or the number of units to get a certain target profit? How many of each of the products must be sold? So to do a quick little review, if you remember when we were dealing with single products, the break-even number of units was basically the fixed cost, total fixed cost or fixed expense, over the unit contribution margin. And the number of units to hit a certain target profit was very similar. It was just target profit plus the fixed cost or fixed expense over the unit contribution margin. Now, when we're dealing with multiple products, we're basically going to be using the same formulas, a very similar process. It's just there's going to be a preliminary step in solving for this unit contribution margin. And before getting into it, what we have to assume with all of this is that the multiple products are sold in constant proportion to each other. Right? That's the assumption we have to make when we're making multi-product calculations. We have to assume the multiple products that the firm is selling are sold in constant proportion. So, for example, a firm, let's say a shoe store, they sell shoes and socks, and they find that for every one shoe that they sell 3 pairs of socks. And so this is what we would be using here. And basically the process is we got to take this and sort of package it up. So we would make this into one package. And basically we'd have to calculate the contribution margin on this one whole package here, right? I'm going to show you how to do that. So for example, let's say that we end up selling, or let's say we're just talking about 5 packages. Well, if we're talking about 5 packages, if we're using this proportion here, remember it's a constant proportion, we'd be talking about 5 shoes and 15 pairs of socks. Right? I just took these numbers and multiplied it by 5. All of this represented one package, so 5 packages. We'd have to multiply these numbers by 5 to get this proportion here. Now, this proportion will be given to you in the question. So either they'll tell you that it's from the past, right? The store has found that this has happened in the past and they expect it to happen in the future, or they'll say that we project this proportion to happen in the future. Now this proportion here, I'm just going to erase this, it's sometimes called, you'll see it called the sales mix in questions, right? So either proportion or a sales mix, both mean the same thing. Now, an important point I want to make is that the sales mix or the proportion, it's always based on number of units. Okay, so that's pretty important to know, because sometimes they'll give you the sales figures for these and they'll give you the number of units. Or sometimes they'll just give you the sales figures and you'll have to figure the number of units out, and I'm going to show you how to do that in a second. Just remember that this proportion, this sales mix that we're going to be using for these calculations, it's always based on the number of units. So for example, let's say that for one shoe it costs $100, and then let's say each pair of socks costs $10, so 3 pairs of socks would be $30. We wouldn't be using this ratio over here, right? The sales numbers of each product. We got to base it on the number of units. Another thing I want to mention is sometimes they won't give you this reduced proportion here. You may have to reduce it yourself. So for example, instead of giving you 1 shoe to 3 pairs of socks, they'll say 2,000 shoes to, let's say, 5,500 pairs of socks. Right? So they'll give you bigger numbers like this. And what you have to do is you need to reduce this to the most simplified ratio, simplified proportion, simplified sales mix as you can. It's kind of like reducing a fraction. So for example, notice that we can divide both of these by 100. So sometimes you may have to do this in multiple steps. So if I take this divided by 100, I would get 20. And then if I take this divided by 100, I would get 55. And then notice that both of these we could divide by 5. And I could divide this by 5. So this would be 4 to 11. And then notice this can't simplify any further. Right? So it's like simplifying a fraction. So if I gave you 2,000 over 5,500, told you to get a simplified fraction, it would be 4 over 11. Some calculators will do that for you right away. Right? So this is the sales mix that we'd be using. So for every 4 shoes that we sell 11 pairs of socks. You always have to get the simplified proportion. Now, you don't necessarily have to be dealing with only 2 products, so you can have 3 products as well. So let's do another example. Let's say that there are t-shirts as well that this company is selling. And so let's change up the numbers here. Let's say that this is a company selling 10,500 shoes. Let's say over here, this would be like 24,500 pairs of socks. And then let's say 7,000 t-shirts as well. So you could have 3 products or even more. And then you got to reduce this. And then reducing 3 is a little bit tougher than 2 because you got to figure out numbers that go into all 3 of these products. So notice that we can divide everything by 500. Let's just start there. So this would be 10,500 divided by 500. That would give us 21. 24,500 divided by 500 would give us 49. And then 7,000 divided by 500, that would give us 14. Right, so we reduce it to this proportion. Notice that these we can divide by 7. So we'd have 3, 7, and 2. And notice we can simplify past that. Right, so for every 3 pairs of shoes this store sells, they sell 7 pairs of socks and 2 t-shirts. So you would package all of this up as one product. Look at it as one product when making these calculations. Now, lots of times you got to be careful in questions. They won't give you the actual number of units that they're working with, whether that's in simplified form or whether they give you a total and you have to simplify it yourself. Sometimes you'll have to extract that information, do a little bit more work beforehand. So notice in this example, total revenue is $600,000, where 45% is from shoes, 30% is from socks, 25% is from t-shirts. And then each pair of shoes, pair of socks, and t-shirt costs $150, $20, and $50 respectively. So notice in this entire example, there's nothing given about the number of units. And that's what our sales mix, remember, is always based on. And so what we got to do is a little bit of work to get those numbers. So what you want to do here is you want to take that total revenue, 600,000, and we're told that 45% of that is coming from shoes. So 45% of 600,000, 0.45 times 600,000, that would give us 270,000. So 270,000 of the 600,000 revenue is coming from shoes. 30% is coming from socks, so that would be 180,000. $100,000, 30% of $600,000. And then the remaining 25% is coming from t-shirts, and that is 25% of 600,000 is 150,000. Remember, these are still in dollars here, right? We're still working with revenue. We just now split up the revenue for each of the products. And notice that we're given the unit cost per product as well. And just in general, if we want to get the number of units sold, we take the total revenue and divide it by the unit cost. Right? That's just the general formula to get the number of units sold. So notice we could do that with this for each of these products. So we could take these shoes, we could divide them by how much each shoe costs. So 270,000 divided by 150, that would give us 1,800 shoes. And notice that this number we get here, that's the number of units. And then here the socks, they cost $20 each. So when we do this calculation, we would get 9,000 socks. Then this here, divide by 50, we would get 3,000 t-shirts. So notice now we have the number of units for each of the products. And notice we had to do a little bit of work beforehand. So just be aware of examples where finding that sales mix, either they'll give it to you straight away, sometimes you may have to do some work beforehand. And now notice we got the number of units, so we could let's write out that proportion here. So 1,800 to 9,000 to 3,000. Notice this is not simplified. We got to simplify this now. So notice we could divide everything by 100. So we'd have 1890 30. And then what? We could divide everything by 6. 6 works, right? So 18 divided by 6 is 3. 90 divided by 6 would give us 15. And then 30 divided by 6 would give us 5. And notice we can't simplify that any further. And so that's our sales mix right there. So for every 3 pairs of shoes, we sell 15 pairs of socks and sell 5 t-shirts. And so that is the sales mix you would use in your calculation. Right? So different scenarios where you got to calculate that sales mix. Just always remember it's always based on the number of units. And what I'm going to do in the next few videos is show you how to take that sales mix and calculate that multi-product break even or the number of units to get a certain target profit.